This is Beyond Busy. I'm Graham Alcott. I'm the author of a number of books, including the global bestseller, How to Be a Productivity Ninja, and I'm the founder of Think Productive. We help people to make space for what matters and get more done, and we partner with some of the world's leading companies who share our mission to transform the world of work. Beyond Busy is where I explore the often messy truths and contradictory relationships around topics like work-life balance, happiness, and success, and explore with interesting people what makes them tick. In short, this is where we ask the bigger questions about work. My guest today is Denise Nurse. Denise is the co-founder of the Black Founders Hub, a network of Black entrepreneurs that was started here in the UK but is now increasingly global. She was also a lawyer and entrepreneur, having started, built, and then sold a really unusual law firm. And she's also worked as a TV presenter for Sky Travel and on shows like Escape to the Country and Watchdog. In this episode, we talk about race and how to encourage Black entrepreneurs, the journey from starting and growing to selling a business. And I think you're going to really learn a lot from Denise's outlook and energy. So let's get straight into it. This is Denise Nurse. We're rolling on with Denise Nurse. How are you doing?
Really well, thank you. Yeah,
really nice to connect. And there's so much stuff I want to talk to you about. Let's start with the Black Founders Hub. And this is something that you have launched with Dave McQueen, who's been on this podcast before. Why the Black Founders Hub and what does it do? And just give us the background to that.
Why do we need something that's called Black Founders Hub? I am a Black founder and I ran my own law firm for many years together with my business partner who is a good friend, and her name is Janvi Patel. So she's an Asian founder. And we, like many Black founders, got used to being in the minority in most rooms we're in most business circles we're in most meetings we're in. And I didn't identify it as an issue, to be honest. It just is a fact of life. I went to a school where I was in the minority. I went to a university, I was in the minority. I went to a job as a Black person doing certain jobs and roles. It was just a fact of life. But the business was quite successful. And 2017, I was standing on a stage giving a talk to about 4,000 lawyers and people in the legal industry. And I was talking about women's equality. But I looked around the room and again, I was I could barely point out any other Black people. And I was so proud of what we'd done with our business and how we'd got it to a really great level. And all I could think about was not being the only one. So that was what I incorporated into my speech that time. It's like, I don't want to be the only one. I'm not a unicorn. I know there are others out there. So that was the seed for me for Black Founders Hub, like trying to find other Black entrepreneurs in the professional services field and bring us together. And that's how I found our third partner. So it's myself, David, and Rashida Abdullah. So she was one of the other 4 Black people, I think, at that event. And she is a Black lawyer who'd worked at a Magic Circle firm and who was just about to launch her own business. We connected and I said, I'd love to do something like this. She said, I'd love to be part of something like this. But we didn't do anything straight away. Life took over. And then, like so many things last year, the murder of George Floyd was a catalyst moment. And I, in my self-reflection, went through the emotions many people went through. So there was profound grief and sorrow. It was traumatic. And it made me think again about my experiences as a Black person in the UK. And having had all of those emotions, my go-to tends to be, what can I do to make a change? And so this idea came back again, like, well, what can we do to make things better? And I love business. So my go-to is to help support others in business and to find ways of creating success. So that's kind of why, because instead of us all being on our own, if we come together as a collective, we know that peer networking works. There's something called the Old Boys Club. That was the thing for a reason. So I just want to create that for Black founders, that safe space, that space to be yourself, that space to connect and to do business. And the key thing with that, what we're doing is it's for business at a higher level. So it's not startups, it's to take existing businesses that could kind of just carry on at a certain level and inspire them and support them to get to 7-figure turnover and beyond, to create something really economically powerful.
And I guess, having done, having done a startup and grown it and then sold it yourself. So you're in this position now where you have so much of that experience that you can then pass on to other people. I wonder, just to sort of flip that round. So when you've now been working with lots of other Black founders and creating this network, what have you learned from them about the issues facing Black founders as opposed to facing white founders or other founders?
Do you know, in some respects, the issues are the same. We're all business people. We're all, struggling to find capital and funding and to get started, to make contacts, how to sell, your confidence. The main issue really is the need for a collective and a safe space where you can just show up as you. There's a certain amount of who you are that you don't have to explain before you can move into the conversation. And that is the experience that a lot of Black people and people from all sorts of other marginalised communities feel. The part of the reason I knew this would work and be powerful is because I joined a women's network. So when I got to 4 or 5 of my business and we were doing okay, but I wanted to do better, I was recommended to join an organisation called the Women's Presidents Organisation. Now, I'd been a member of many other business networks, but not one that was a small group of women CEOs of a certain level. And being in that space, just where we turned up and we could unapologetically talk about whatever it was, and it was a mix of childcare issues, or there were single women, there were older women, there were young women, we could talk about, health issues and whatever it was. But we started the conversation from a place of knowing, without apology, without explanation, more than I had in any other circle. And that ability to show up like that and be vulnerable was really, really precious. And that's the thing I'd say I'd noticed the most about the collective that we have here, that they're all plugged into business networks. They're all doing all the right things anyway. But the force of energy of being around other people who kind of you can speak to on a certain level, who have a certain understanding with you, has been emotional at times. It's really quite touching. And to know that we exist, just that feeling of you're not the unicorn, that we exist and we're all working hard and we're at that level and we're bringing that collective together. So I'd say that is the most significant thing.
I feel like that's like a really fundamental thing in leadership. So, if you're putting together a team or working with people, and likewise just in sort of creating, spaces or dialogue of all kinds of things, is like there's a real human need for acceptance and a real human need for vulnerability, right? And to have that comfort to be able to be vulnerable. And not often when you have that level of comfort, that's where you feel much more able to just sort of explore the more knotty issues that are actually sometimes the ones that just unlock everything and make everything work better, right?
Exactly. It is that level of vulnerability, because it means some of those issues are set aside and then you can actually just deal with your work issues without the added question that you may have in your head that I'm sitting in this room, I'm the only Black person amongst a room of white middle-aged men, and what do they think of me when I say I didn't hit my numbers this month? Am I just reporting fact, or am they also thinking, oh, we've got one in here and she's not good enough? That may not be true, but your own thoughts in your own head can be an inhibitor because you feel out of place. If you're not even questioning your race when you sit in a space, you can move past that and then get on with the work.
Yeah.
It's really powerful. And as I say, it's the same. It's not to say that therefore we end up with pods of only very exclusive groups, that everyone should only work in exclusive groups. That is not the purpose. But having a space where you can connect like that fuels your interactions elsewhere, so we can be collaborative and diverse in the way we should be working with organisations. But I think recognising the need for that is really important. And as I say, the proof is there. One of the oldest networks going that seems to be doing it really well for all of its members, the Old Boys Network, where you get together in a club and you hang out and you meet at a certain level, seems to have done wonders. So I just want to create a piece of that for us.
Yeah, and I wish you well in creating that and expanding that. And also it'd be quite good to smash up the Old Boys Network as well on a whole other level.
Oh, absolutely. I like flipping tables. There's so many reasons for starting it. I mean, one of the other reasons is I just got fed up. I've been talking about diversity and inclusion for a long time, and different ways of working. The law firm I ran was all about flexible working and just trying to do things differently, see a different way of having a workforce so that people wouldn't have to do what we're doing, and you can just show up as yourself and you're catered for and you're thought about. But progress is just so slow. So I'm from the legal profession, and we have been talking about this for a long time. And at a certain level, you'll see the numbers of women entering the profession are going up, considering that women have only just been allowed to become solicitors for just over 100 years. We celebrated 100 years since women were legally, it was actually illegal to be a lawyer 100 years ago, which is just crazy, right? So we've only just got past that 100 years. And women can be in the profession. So we've now got to the point where entering the legal profession, you're now getting more women than men doing law degrees, etc. But we get this, what do you want to call it, a glass ceiling, we get obstacles, whatever it is, you get to a certain point and that just drops off a cliff. And partnership and leadership of the businesses and the firms running our profession are still, we're still trying to get to 30% women. And it's been said many times, but I will say it again, we are 50%, 51% of the population. There is no need for it. And there's a massive pipeline, but there are structural barriers that stop you going any further because of the way things were structured to support, a male dominant with a certain family structure way of doing things. So to change that from within, it's really hard work. And part of the thinking of Black Founders Hub is just to change things from without rather than within, create something new, show a new way of doing things, and that might be adopted by the mainstream as they've done in so many other areas. Like they won't do it themselves. Once you see an outlier doing it, think of the music industry, being disrupted. Think of all the industries that have been disrupted. They won't do it when there is no motivation to do that, when you're being successful. Even if you think it sounds morally right, there isn't enough motivation to make that change. If an outlier makes a change and is successful, that becomes a driving force for change. So by creating businesses set up differently from the start, you've got a motivator for change.
And it's about momentum, isn't it? There's that Derek Sivers video where he talks about first followers. And so there's like the one crazy guy dancing in the field, and then one other person joins him, and that's the first follower. And then what I really like about that little three-minute video is that then what happens then is the momentum gains. And so you suddenly have 5, 10, 15 more people all joining him. And then Derek Sivers just kind of says it in a very sort of throwaway way. But for me, it was one of the most powerful things about that whole first follower idea is like, now that's the in crowd. And so that's the place that everyone wants to be. So if you were sat down not wanting to get involved with something because you thought that you'd look stupid, then that goes out the window, because now that's the cool thing to be part of. And so that momentum feels to me like, that would definitely be the thing to sort of take this forward, right? Like once you can start to have proof of concept and start to gain a bit more of a movement, then that will definitely happen.
Exactly. I mean, the vision I have in my head is, hugely powerful organisations where 90% of the leadership is women or 90% of the leadership is black.
Yeah.
And so that will sound really strange to some. Notice if it sounds strange. Why? Because we're used to the opposite or something different.
Yeah.
But having those collectives all doing well, all proving success, just proves that it can be done differently, as you say. And then there can be collaboration, there can be mergers, there can be adoptions of new ways of doing things. So that's the vision I have. I'd love to see that visually, a real change of the narrative and a change of the visuals of what successful business looks like.
Shake it up, man. And feels like the legal profession and professional services generally is definitely primed for disruption, right?
Yes, well, we've focused at Black Founders Hub on professional services in particular, because in some ways it's a level playing field in that you can, you get your qualification of whatever it is, you become, you move into finance or consultancy or marketing, and there are, as I say, there are more people coming in through the ranks and getting to university and coming out the other end with the professional qualifications. So you've got the starting point, and then what? So it's just this really ripe, fertile ground. Also, I think it's something that we do really well in the UK, and we're in this changing landscape. We don't know what's going to happen. We've had, obviously, COVID, we've got Brexit. And one of the things that we do well is professional services. We have some excellent professional service outputs, and we contribute a huge amount to the economy. So I think from a business perspective, there's a massive opportunity here to shake things up, to encourage new models and new ways of doing things. And quite frankly, most things, what's what I know. So if I know it, that's where I'll start. And David and Rashida were all professional services as well. So a real opportunity to tap in there and make change. And the interesting thing has been, so we're not exclusively for lawyers. In fact, it's about anyone in professional services. So each group of 10, so we're gathering groups of 10. We put them together in a cohort, and then they commit to working with each other for 12 months at a time. So they meet, they pay a coach, they get access to information, resources. Those who've walked the walk and are a few steps ahead come back as fellows to share. But within that group of 10, they're from non-competing disciplines. So we'll have education, marketing, HR, environment, property, and the same story is told no matter which profession you pick. It's there isn't one that says, oh no, it's all working well here. It's very recognisable that there's a limit to how far you could go, or the structure of the way the profession worked wasn't conducive to how they wanted to be. There was a reason they started in and then left.
So you mentioned part of the kind of seed for all this was obviously sort of looking to do something off the back of what happened with George Floyd and that kind of huge outpouring of emotion and intent and everything that happened. We're recording this summer 2021. So I'd love to know from you just like what you think has changed or not changed over the last year.
The number one thing I think that has changed is we have changed, i.e. Black people. That's what I hope. Certainly that's what I feel in my circle, that we have changed. We have decided enough is enough. So there's Black Founders Hub, but there are several other organisations and starts and people just trying to do things differently. Unfortunately, I don't feel the same about everything else. And I think last summer was a collision of so many life events happening at that moment, which created the catalytic moment. So, the world was on pause. It was all quite new. Social media allowed the pictures to be shared very rapidly, so we could see very clearly there could be no grey area about what happened, how long it took for him to die, the fact that he was, saying he couldn't breathe, the fact that there were witnesses trying to say stop. It was all played out, and as a world, we didn't have much else to be doing at that time because we were all locked in, and so everyone could collectively focus. It chimed with what was going on. There were so many reasons that I felt the universe had that moment happen the way it did. And what we hoped would happen, I think, after that was the kind of outpouring of grief and action and the collective, oh my gosh, we didn't realise it was that bad, we should do something, would really be meaningful. So I remember watching all of the businesses making the commitments and the black squares, if you remember. Always a bit sceptical about that, but hey, I'm all for good intention and giving people the benefit of the doubt. A year later, I feel very strongly the agenda has moved on. That pledges that were made had no substance behind them. That doing the real work to make change is just a bit too difficult. So we started with the listening exercises, and many organisations I know went into, hey, we're listening. How did we miss this? This wasn't just about someone's murder. This outpouring of people saying, like the Me Too movement, actually, this is my daily reality. This is what it's actually been like working here. This is why I'm so upset, because I carry this level of fear or this level of racism, or I deal with microaggressions, or all of these things. And there was this wonderful moment. What's changed has been the ability to have a bit more of a conversation at first. There was, people reading books. There are now discussions about white privilege and, being anti-racist and all of these sorts of terminologies that weren't necessarily being discussed openly before. So that was great. But beneath that, I think we've seen organisations that have struggled to make the real culture change that's required if you want to make systemic change. It's after you've listened, then what are you actually going to do? And to do different, you have to be different, in my view. And I think that is the struggle. And I think what's happened is after a while, it's gone back to, well, there are lots of the all lives matter, which is one of the things that came up. I know it's cringy, but I think that's what's happened. Everyone's, then the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, and we can just put everything together that's other and say, hey, we collectively want to fix it, rather than kind of allowing the space for the individuals, groups to be heard and to speak and for real change. And I say that, my evidence for that, other than how I feel, is the people that I'm speaking to, the organisations that I'm aware of. I know that lots of groups were spawned and there was, as I say, this listening moment. But when it's come to the tangibles, and the tangibles would look like meaningful ways of moving people up the chain. So going, actually, I really do want to look at how we will get more diverse leadership, and not just hiring a Black person as the D&I person, but looking at all the other roles. That would denote some real change. The fact that on our football pitches, we're still having this debate about whether it's okay for the football players to take the knee or not, and the booing, and that's the level of conversation, says to me nothing's changed. The fact that our government issued a report that says there is no structural racism and systemic racism and there's nothing to see here, and aren't we doing well, tells the story. It's like, okay, okay, we see where we're at.
I'd agree with a lot of that, and I think the thing for me is that it feels like something that just shouldn't, like, in a way, it's, of course it's political, but in a way it shouldn't be politicized, right? So the whole taking the knee thing, and also it feels like some of the companies in the States, Basecamp and Coinbase, are making these statements, and it seems like what they're saying is we're sort of tired of listening, right? That's kind of like the at the heart of that Coinbase statement about we're going to be purpose driven or mission driven or whatever it was, and at the heart of that Basecamp thing about we will not discuss politics, it's like, this, we shouldn't be saying that this is discussing politics. We should be saying this is discussing whether people feel safe and included and comfortable at work, right? Like that, to me, that's just not controversial. And the idea of Basecamp's statement, I think, it led to a lot of resignations at that company. But I would say that that's like, in a way, it's just bad HR rather than it being them playing politics, right? It's like they've actually just shot themselves in the foot because they thought they had a choice not to be able to listen. But I think you don't have a choice not to listen in those circumstances, because that's your community. Like your workplace is your community, right? Feels to me like there has been an acknowledgement in some companies and in some places that I've interacted with, that there's a difference between racism being about a person's bad view of race versus racism being a structural thing that isn't necessarily contained in any one person's evil brain, but is actually just a systemic thing that sort of exists. And I feel like there has been some progress on just understanding that. But I guess where it falls down is, like you say, what do people do with that? And it's hard, right? This stuff is really hard.
And you have to want to do hard things.
Yeah.
And you have to have enough vision to see the benefit of doing hard things, not for tomorrow's numbers, but beyond that. And that's why I think the current leadership of many organisations might not be the ones to do that. But if we change, that's what makes the difference. If Coinbase comes out with those, statements like that, and then people stop working with them or they leave, that makes a difference. If we all sit back and go, it's too hard, and that's just the way it is, which is how I think it was for a long time, including for Black people. This is not I think we'd all got to a point where we were collectively like, this is just the way it is, and we'll all just carry on. Or not all, but a lot of people. I do think last year was a wake-up moment for that, to say, actually, this is not just how it is or should be. And I think one of the great things to come out of this will be changes to the curriculum, really getting to the nitty-gritty of the stories and the conditioning that we perpetuate. So the toppling of statues, the discussion around why there are statues, the discussion around the wealth that our country is built on, the discussion around the empire and what that really means and how it evolved, and that it's part of all of us. Collectively, I get to claim the empire as much as anyone else in this country, and it's an uncomfortable past to reconcile with, because it's part of what makes this country great, in quotes, and part of what's collectively caused so much suffering across the world. We don't get to just have one part of it and not the other. Collectively owning the story and telling all parts of the story is what I think is going to be the powerful piece that will create the change for the generations to come. Just a proper understanding. I think so much of this is just ignorance, a real just lack of any thought about how we are where we are. And so David Olusogu's work and all of the work of all these great historians who are really trying to piece that together for people now, like, the mills were there for a reason. Our buildings look the way they do for a reason. We were all part of this economic triad of, slavery and produce, and the wealth that we're built on is because we didn't pay for our labour for many years. There's so much that if it was just talked about, everyone would just have a different understanding, I think. But to pretend that didn't happen and we were somehow magically really we've done really well in this country, and that was just a blip in the past, and we were not really. In fact, we abolished slavery, and aren't we great? Let's tell the whole story and give everyone their voice. And if that happens, and I'm seeing some of that, I'm working with one of the universities at the moment. They're really going root and branch. They have a project going through every part of their curriculum to look at how they are teaching, whether it's from science to history to English, and what messages and what stories they're telling and what examples they're using, and really doing that work. And as I say, that's hard work. Not everyone's going to vote for it. It's going to be like, why do we need to do that? So the brave leaders who do that are the ones I salute.
It feels like there's this almost like a fatigue setting in certain organizations. And I like what you said before about there was a time where Black people had just got to a stage of saying, we're just going to settle with this just being how it is, versus then sort of crossing that chasm into, no, we're not going to settle for that anymore. And it feels like that fatigue needs to be able to be overcome in order to get a lot of organizations really much more focused on that. How do you keep up your energy around this, and how do you notice people in the Black Founders networks, the cohorts that you're working with?
Like everything, the key for me, it's really simple. You have to surround yourself with people who lift you higher. You have to take the time to be, hence the need for Black Founders Hub. You don't have to be in situations where you have got to have this discussion or it's going to be less comfortable. Then make sure you're filling up your cup. So you've got a space or an outlet to have discussions with others, to share, to talk, to connect. And then that just will help you move forward in your day-to-day of whatever you've got to do. Certainly for me, that's been on many levels what I've been doing over the last year. So Black Founders Hub has been a huge part of that. And I know I've had the privilege of not working for an organisation and creating my own, but creating a space where others can come and do that has been huge. And I've been doing that in other things as well, really noticing the need for the collective and for people to have a space to talk and to connect, and then to go back out into the world and kind of interact. So that, and then all the basics. Nothing ever changes in that, keeping healthy, exercise, walking, finding something to smile about. Life isn't all doom and gloom. With all of these things we want to do is always because we're looking for something to bring us joy. Whatever it is you're looking for in the world, right? You're looking for a feeling of peace or of happiness. Why do you want to make this change? Because you want to feel happy, you want to feel better. So trying to feel better now, ahead of time, is my number one tip.
What was that phrase I heard a little while ago? Don't calm down by fixing the problem. Fix the problem by calming down. Right? So, like looking for those little micro wins in your day, or little micro moments of joy, like you say. Really important. Okay, so I'm going to interrupt the podcast, which I don't do very often, and that must mean I've got something very important to share with you. So what I want to share is I've got these 2 really big events coming up, and I would love you to join me. Let's move on to, let's talk about Hailbury. So Hailbury was the law firm that you referred to before, that you started and then sold. So how long was that journey from the starting point to so then you became the VP of Elevate, the company, right? And then exited from that. So how long was that whole journey?
That whole journey started in 2007 and ended in last year, in April 2020. So 13 years. So I qualified as a lawyer in 2000, the turn of millennium, and started in a city practice. For all the reasons we've just discussed, I realised that was not going to be the world I wanted to progress in, and went to work in-house for Sky Television. And actually, as a place to work, that was really enjoyable. It was certainly in my legal team. There were only 21 of us, but there was a nice diverse group. It was run by a woman. I felt very comfortable there. I felt able to progress. A meander which we'll come back to. Yeah. I stopped being a lawyer for a while, became a television presenter.
Yes, I was going to talk to you about that.
Yeah, so we will talk about that. And that came about because I was at Sky and they ran a competition. But what it gave me was time, while I was no longer practicing as a lawyer for a business, was time to decide again whether I still loved the law and that profession. I had this outball. You can go and do something completely different. It's like deciding, would you marry your partner again or something? They recommend you ask yourself
that. That's probably a dangerous question for lots of people listening to this, right?
And it was that, and the surprise was I said yes. Yeah. Having been a lawyer for a while, which can be quite tiring. My thought process was, I actually like the law. I like being a lawyer, but there are things that I would change about the way it's practiced. And so that for me was the reason for starting Hailbury, which I co-founded with Janvi Patel, who had been his good friend of mine, and we were trainees together. And actually she'd got to a similar point in her life and she started the business where we had coffee, and she was just figuring out what to do and looking for a partner. And we both thought, this makes sense. Let's create the type of law firm that we want to work for. That I can buy into. So that's where we started coffee shops, Soho House, kitchen tables back in 2007 in West London.
Did you have any moments where you had to sort of plot out your working relationship to make sure that it was separate from your friendship, and just like navigate that whole thing of because essentially when you go into business with somebody, you're quite quickly sharing each other's life savings account, right? Like it's part of the deal. So did you have any conversations around that, and what were the boundaries that you sort of put in place around that?
Absolutely. So I'm a commercial lawyer by background. Janvi's an employment lawyer. But it's one of my big things is that when you start off in something, to set those boundaries and it's not even boundaries, it's expectations.
Yes,
things can change, but let's at least have the discussion. I'm always intrigued and still surprised at how many people don't have those discussions before they get into these unions, that it's all about the shiny thing they're going to do. And people, again, don't want to have the difficult conversations. So it's something Janvi and I had right from the start. And we talk about our union as like a marriage. So having brought up that analogy, it was like that. She knows as much about me as my husband would, in terms, as you say, you're sharing financial information. But yes, I would recommend it. There's a legal construct for it. So there's your shareholders agreement or your partnership agreement. And I think people fall into the trap of thinking that's some legal document that you have to have because you're supposed to have it. And we'll think about that again in 20 years' time when we're going to sell.
Yeah.
So my process is different to that. And thinking about what you do in productivity, I find you get so much done so much quicker once you just have this conversation, which is a one-pager, just looking at why you're doing it, and asking each other, what's the purpose? And you'll assume the other person's on the same page as you, and they very rarely are. My purpose was, I said very clearly, I'm really interested in running a business. I want to know what it's like to build something from the start, grow it, and get it to a stage where either I can sell it or I can hire someone else to run it and I don't have to be involved. Janvi was on the same page. There was a third business partner who that wasn't her dream. Actually, what she wanted to do was really be involved and run it more like a partnership model. So that's very basic conversation at the start had us all going, oh, so I think it's going to go in this direction. You think it's going to go in that direction. What do we want to do? And we had to make a decision about what this was going to be. And then we looked at what our reasons were for outside of business. So at that point in time, we were all single. But I wanted to get married and have a family at some point, and so did Janvi. So we talked about that. So then we decided that our friendship and our family would come first always. And if one person needed to adjust to look after that, then that would always come first, and we would find a way to make that work. So we very clearly had that discussion up front. And then I guess because we're lawyers, we always look at what's the worst case scenario. So we always had if this all goes wrong, what are we going to do plan?
Yeah.
So we had insurance to the hilt. But also our backup plan, if someone wants to leave, then we shut it down. We both leave. We're not, that was the basics. But we had to have that discussion and idea, and that saw us through difficult times, that reminder of why are we doing this again? And during that time, we tested all of it. So we both got married. Janvi had 3 children. Then she went to live in LA with her husband. I got married, got my 2 stepchildren. So I became an instant mum, moved to Southampton so I could support them. And then I had my son, who was born 3 months premature. And I had to spend, 3 months in the NICU with him in the neonatal unit. So all of those things got tested, like, oh, how are we going to do this? How are we going to keep going? Or what are we going to do? But we were always able to come back to, well, why are we doing this? This is our purpose. This is what we committed to. This is how we will make decisions. And it made decision-making so much easier.
Yeah, tell me more about that thing you said there. So if one of you wanted to leave, then you would both leave and you'd shut it down. So if she wanted to leave but you didn't, then all of your work just sort of goes out the window at that moment though, right?
It's not necessarily goes out the window, but it's not I can force you. That would be the starting point, so that you're always in tune then with what the other one wants. You could then look at it rather than this be, is someone trying to edge the other person out?
Yeah.
That kind of process, okay. Thought process. Yeah. Well, you want to leave, so I'm going to encourage you to leave now.
So that then I have 100% of the shares or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. It takes it to a different, and it means you start the conversation about actually what do you really want to do? Why do you really want to do it from a different thought process?
Yeah, because I guess all of it really comes down to just being open with intentions, and also this whole podcast really is about that interface between work and life and the values that we have in life versus in work, and just that whole thing of where life might take you in a different direction or mean that the business needs to serve you in a different way.
I recommend it. Having that. I do it in everything now. So Black Founders Hub, we've already talked about, we have that conversation, up front. It's a different organisation. It's non-profit. So we very clearly talked about up front, well, how much time do you actually have to devote to this as an exec, running it, creating it? What's our plan? What if you can only commit so many hours and I can commit more? When do we want to hire someone? Will we ever pay each other? And to not just blindly run into these things and think you'll work it out later. Actually do it at the start while you've got the blank sheet and get those parameters down. Always encourage
And then also have, my other thing that I would add to that is, do it at the beginning in that way. and then also have spaces where that's all you're talking about. So it's not
Oh, yes.
subtext through the thing that you're working on right now. It's like, okay, where are we at? And what's the strategy for the next 3 years? And like coming back to that really regularly. And I think, so Elena, who's my MD at Think Productive and my business partner, I mean, we would do that really regularly where kind of once a quarter we'd go on a big long walk. And then that really had to tail off through COVID, obviously. And we've tried to do that a bit on Zoom, but I think there's just sometimes just no substitute for just either being in the room with someone or going for a walk with someone and just being able to be in that much more human to human, taking a step back, strategic headspace, rather than being kind of in the day-to-day, what's the numbers and what's this and all of that. So yeah, I think keeping those things regularly is I've definitely found helpful. You mentioned you slipped in a minute ago. And then I became a TV star. So let's come back to that. So you were working for Sky, and then you ended up winning this competition. So yeah, tell us about that.
Well, interestingly, I'm clearing out lots of things at the moment, and I found back in 2003, I decided, and I still don't know why, but I decided to invest in a one-day television presenting course run by an amazing company called Positive. I always big them up, and wonderful Glenn McKinsey. So this is 2003. So I'd been at Sky for a couple of years, and it's something I, again, recommend investing in yourself. And I did it because I like dancing and performing as my hobby. So back to what brings you joy and keeping joy as part of your life. So I'd always done that. And I was doing a lot of charity work and working with young people in dance. I was hosting events as part of my hobby. So I think I just decided that would be a nice thing because I was enjoying it to invest in, to get some skills. Thought nothing of it, did it for the day and didn't think much of it. But then a year later, this poster went up at work that said, "Can you cut it? Do you think you could be the next presenter?" And at the time, Sky were trying to make Sky feel less corporate for all of the support services. They were like, "We are a TV and media company." It was James Murdoch in charge. And let's do something so that the people in the suits in the office, in legal or behind the call centre desks in Scotland can get involved in our purpose. What do we do here? We provide entertainment. So I entered again in that spirit. This will just be fun. But as it turned out, it was a serious competition. I made it to the top 10, so there were various rounds. And in the top 10, 4 of us had all done that same television presenting course. Isn't that interesting? So it's the skills that you learn, and we didn't know, we'd all randomly decided to do it for whatever. I guess we all worked at a TV company, so there must have been something in our DNA. But that investing in yourself was actually paid dividends, I think, so our skills. But once you're in the top 10, you made a show reel, and then you were voted on as to whoever got the most votes got an opportunity to present, on TV. So I presented a press junket, which is doing some interviews for a film. Think of that scene in Notting Hill, which I know is really old now, but in a hotel room and the stars are there, and then journalist after journalist after journalist, and I got to be one of those journalists for a day. But I was also offered the opportunity to screen test to become a weather presenter. And I said, no thank you. What? I'm a lawyer, and we've talked about my love for law and how much I loved my job, and then I was, and then went on to do something else. So my brain had severe cognitive dissonance that it could not marry up this idea of I'm a lawyer and I could be a weather presenter. So I said no, which is unusual for me. I usually want to do things. And they said, why don't you just screen test, have fun? So when I got back to the principle of having fun, I was like, well, as long as you don't think I'm wasting your time, I thought, okay, I'll have a go. So I had a go, and I did actually enjoy it, and I learned something. So then I thought, well, if I was going to be a weather presenter, how would that work? Because I can't leave my legal career to start at the bottom of being of a TV career. I've got a mortgage now. What happened is I was given a 6-month secondment. So it was made to work for me. I could go and be a weather presenter for 6 months and then go back to law. But as the universe would have it, I never went back to my legal job. I became a full-time weather presenter for Sky News. And then I got an opportunity to become a presenter for the BBC. So I presented Escape to the Country, a property show, for 7 years. And all of that I did whilst launching and building Hailbury. So for a while, I had a multi-track career, and it was great. What I learned so much. I learned that I can be other things other than the label that I'd attached to myself from university. You know, I'm a lawyer and that's who I am and that's what I do. I was like, well, no, you're not. You can be this other thing as well. I learned teamwork. I love working with TV crews. I love working on productions for that moment of we've all got to come together to create something. You have to get past the obstacles. You have to get past egos. You just have to make this happen. And I like storytelling. So I loved Escape to the Country, working with these couples who were trying to change their lives by moving to some often places they'd never been. They've only been like for a weekend before. They're like, I'm going to move my whole life and go live in this village with this dream. I was always intrigued as to what would make you want to do that. So a lot of fun, a lot of fun.
And I think I read somewhere that you put that on hold to have your kids.
No, that's true. As I mentioned, my son was born in 2013 prematurely. So we have no idea why, but I was only at the end of my second trimester. Hailbury was growing and doing really well. And Janvi had already moved to LA. I'd already moved to Southampton and I was doing the TV presenting. And so at that moment, something had to give. And TV required me to travel around a lot. So I focused instead of being very close to my son, and then put all efforts into Hailbury. And to be fair, at that point, we then grew it quite rapidly.
Yeah. Do you think it's something that you go back to?
For sure. Never say never.
Yeah. Yeah. Never say never. So you've just had this really interesting career with lots of different facets to it. I wonder if you've got any, because obviously part of this podcast also is about productivity. Do you have any sort of common, I guess, sort of common techniques or common approaches that you find have worked across all those different sort of areas of work that you've been part of?
In terms of the why I do the various things, and I think knowing your why and what you love is important. So the opportunity to create something new, do something differently has always been important to me. So with Hailbury, we weren't just a law firm, we were about flexible working. So finding a way to change people's lives is what is the thing that I love, and helping them to tell a new story about who they are and what they are. And whenever there's a difficult moment, and there are always plenty, when I think, oh, what do I love about what I'm doing? That is my kind of guiding force that I'll keep doing it. If I don't have an answer to that anymore, that's my time to move on and do something else. But if, despite the noise, despite the person who was upset that day, or the contract that you didn't win, or whatever the thing is that's not going well that day, if I can go, oh, what do I love about this? And with Hailbury, I loved working with lawyers and helping them to create a new dream life. With Escape to the Country, I loved, like I say, being with these people, again, with their dream life. With Black Founders Hub, it's helping people move on to their dreams. If I'm doing that, I'm happy, and the rest of it will fall into place. So I recommend that, just being really honest with yourself about what is it you love? What is the thing that when you're doing that, time stops and you're no longer clock watching or stressed out. And that is different for everyone. That's the beauty, isn't it? Some people, it's your numbers in your spreadsheet, and some people it's something else. In terms of managing all of it, I would say managing my brain has been the number one thing I've had to do and had to learn. And so very early on, I have worked with coaches, and I've worked with, as I said, I've joined networks with always the view of setting aside time to work on the bigger picture of what I'm doing and not getting too sucked into all of the details, because the details will keep coming and there'll always be more. But setting aside that clear time to go, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? What's the bigger strategy? How can I look at my thinking to make that more effective? Is practice that I keep. And then, doing what I love, making sure there's always joy, so keeping up the dancing, still head out for some dance classes, or just turn the music on and go crazy in the kitchen.
It feels like there's 2 or 3 really common themes just hearing you talk. So there's this whole like pursuing your joy and being really intentional about choosing the things that are going to bring you that joy. And then something about which I think overlaps with what also brings you joy, which is this idea of people coming together and creating stuff and changing stuff. That just feels like kind of runs through, everything that you've talked about as well. And I love that idea that you talked about before about being around people that fill your cup, which is obviously what you're doing with Black Founders Hub, but it's also something I think it feels like you're really conscious of doing that for yourself and just making sure that you have that in your life, which is hugely inspiring. And then one other thing I wanted to touch about before we finish was just before we press record, I was talking about the book that I'm writing at the moment on kindness. And one of the things that you said is, yeah, I think I'm probably a kind leader. And we were also talking about how it's often a real struggle for people to think about who the leaders have been in their life who've been kind. So I'd just love to hear from you on what you think kindness looks like in leadership and why do you think it's important?
And we were having that short discussion before we start recording, and it's such a great question. Because when you first said it, I thought the answer should be obvious, but I've been sitting with it thinking, well, what truly is kindness? And is there such thing as a kind leader, really? Don't we show elements of kindness at some times and not in others? And isn't everyone a mixture? So it's actually spawned loads more questions in my head. But I think kindness comes from, firstly, kindness to oneself. I think great leaders who have learned or who practice the art of being kind to themselves have the ability to be kind to others. If you are running yourself to the ground, if you are not saying very nice things to yourself, if you are being your own worst enemy, it's hard actually to offer kindness to others truly, because it will come from a not good place. So I think leaders who are able to do that are the ones who show true kindness. And then there's that basic skill of listening, which I think is truly kind, truly allowing people to be heard in whichever way they show up, which requires bravery to do that, but that is kind, to offer someone that kindness, and then to consider their viewpoint, and really do that as an act, a real active thing, to really take into consideration someone else's viewpoint, even if it's uncomfortable and I don't like it, and to examine that, which comes back to being kind to yourself and having real agency over your own mind and your own thoughts, to have that ability to sit with something uncomfortable, hear it, and then see what I can do with that and how I can make that work or not work, or what it means for my organisation. So those are my initial thoughts. And thinking about who I thought was kind, I was laughing when you asked me, because I was thinking, I'm thinking of some really tough leaders that I had as bosses before,
yeah,
who I liked, but would I describe them as kind? Maybe not. Why would I describe myself as kind? I think I did all those things and listened, but I think the kindness isn't a weak word. It's not kind, so walk over. It, as I said, it comes from that place of really knowing and listening, and then sometimes being firm and saying, this is what we're doing for the good of everyone, or for the good of you even. And so that sometimes that means, I think often a kind leader will make decisions. A kind leader will walk the walk, and do what they have to do sometimes, and then and take the consequences. But there's so many things that come into it, to kind leadership. I love, I'm a big fan of Oprah. I don't know much about the intricacies of how she runs her businesses, but I love the way she sets out her purpose and her vision with her team. And she talks to them about intention, so everyone knows what they're doing. It offers them the kindness of knowing this is what we're doing here, and this is our guiding principle, and this is how we show up for each other. I think that's really kind, just being transparent.
she's also like empathy on steroids, Oprah, as well, isn't she? Like just her connection with people and just how she builds that trust with people, I think is, also just a really big part of kindness actually as well. So well, love to just pick your brains on that. That was great. And I think maybe I'll come back and ask you some more questions on that as the book develops.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to think about it a bit more. So I'm just thinking, I just can't think of a book on leadership about kindness. It's such a great topic. So sure you'll have a great journey on that.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping. And you're doing coaching as well. So I don't know if you want to just, as we finish, just share where people can connect with you, and if you want to just share any more details of that as well. I'm sure people would love to hear it.
Yeah, so as my next iteration of self, I sold the business we talked about, and April 2020 was going to take a break and travel around the world. And the world stopped, and that's not going. Actually, I lied. I'm finally traveling on Saturday. But anyway, gave me pause to think about what next and what brings me joy, and pulling everything together, working with other founders and helping them to scale their businesses and find their path is something I'm really passionate about. So I am now offering business and success coaching. You can find me, it's really easy, denisnurse.com. So you can just check my website. I do one-to-one, or I do a particular course that I'm running. And the idea, I'm particularly working with women, but it's not exclusive, but I'm who I would have wanted when I was in those early days of Hailbury, just another businesswoman who's kind of been there, has had some of those experiences. And then we talk about things like the things that can sometimes stereotypically be seen as the women don't know anything about finance and knowing your numbers and getting really comfortable around your data. So I tackle all of that and get the people I work with really confident in being the CEO of their business. So knowing their numbers and their data and their marketing and all of that stuff, but from a very kind and empathetic viewpoint. But it's brilliant. I love helping others to make an impact. So anyone who's trying to do that, who wants some help, that's what I do.
Nice. And we'll put the link to that in the show notes as well. And just to say again, just thank you so much for being here and being on Beyond Busy.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm a fan, so delighted. It's a real honour to have been on the show with you today.
This video is sponsored by Think Productive, home of the Productivity Ninja. We help people and organisations to increase their impact and make space for what matters through a range of workshops, programmes and coaching. Head to thinkproductive.com to find out more. Are you interested in booking me as a speaker for your event? You want to sign up for my Rev Up for the Week email? Do you want to buy some of my books? Or do you just want to find out what I'm doing right now? It's all at grahamalcott.com/links. And if you like this video, please like, subscribe and share so we can make more. Thanks for watching.